تمكنت من قتل العشرات من الإرهابيين في منطقة.
Iraqi security forces kill over 279 terrorists in 24 hours, scoring major advances against Al-Qaeda militants in Mosul. The Syrian army regains full control of the strategic town of Kasab near the Turkish border after months of fierce clashes with foreign-backed militants. And a truce broken as fresh clashes erupt between Yemeni government forces and Houthi rebels close to the capital. This is Al-Ittijah World News. I'm Zainab Alawi. The Iraqi army has gained the upper hand in its fight against the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant militants, with Iraqi security sources reporting that the death toll amongst militants has exceeded 270 in the past 24 hours.
The battle for territorial control in northern Iraq is now turning in the Iraqi army's favor. After days of uncertainties in which ISIL militants managed to seize control of 3 provinces in a surprising and a swift raid, the military have recovered from the initial onslaught and have begun to regain ground. Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki's security spokesman, Lieutenant General Qasim Atta, confirmed the advances made by the army.
The Iraqi security forces have killed 279 terrorists in the past 24 hours as they regained the initiative in the war against ISIL. More victories have been registered by the Air Force and military jets, which have pummeled ISIL positions within Salah ad-Din province and continue to do so as we speak.
The counter-offensive, which was launched on Saturday, has already seen government forces retain the provinces of Diyala and most parts of Salah ad-Din. And now the northern city of Mosul in Nainawa province has been encircled amid heavy clashes. The Air Force has relentlessly bombarded extremist militant positions in the city over the past 24 hours, while the ground forces have moved in from the south, retaking a number of towns and villages along the way. Now that the Iraqi military have recovered from an early setback, the ISIL machine appeared to lose momentum. And with most of the Iraqi population fed up by the regular indiscriminate violence perpetrated by the extremists, it seems that the time has come for Iraq to rid the country of ISIL once and for all.
Now, defiant Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki gave a morale-boosting speech to hundreds of army volunteers who enlisted after the call made by the top religious authority in Iraq.
In response to the calls made by the top religious authority, we will eradicate terrorism in Iraq. I call on all Iraqi people, rise up and crush the mercenaries. Keep in mind that you are defending your nation and future. We will march to liberate every inch of Iraqi soil. Now we are prepared after gaining the initiative in this fight against the extremist ISIL. Where are you running to? We will follow you and crush you.
Well, let's cross over to our correspondent in Iraq, Wissam al-Bayati. Wissam, what's the latest concerning the Iraqi government's counteroffensive against ISIL militants?
Yes, in fact, the Iraqi army has conducted several military operations, and today the Iraqi army has targeted a house, was hosting a meeting among for the ISIL leaders, with burning 2 vehicles, where was actually carrying 7 ISIL members, and in the house, after destroying the house was actually hosting more than 20 leaders of Al-Qaeda and the ISIL-linked militants. Today, the Iraqi army has actually announced that he has targeted very vital targets for the ISIL, and he actually killed more than 25 members of the ISIL and wounded more than 40 others, according to the reports which comes from the informers from inside the city of Fallujah and Naimiyah. In addition to the Iraqi artillery and Iraqi Air Force have played an important role in hunting down the posts of the ISIL militants and their places. In addition to the snipers, the Iraqi snipers today have killed 2 other snipers from the ISIL members who have been actually hiding inside the houses of the Iraqi civilians who have led their cities to prevent the violence against their family members and themselves. The final reports of the Iraqi security forces, Iraqi security forces today in its best shape and best stances. In addition to, they are, as I mentioned before, waiting for further orders from the Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces, which is the Iraqi Prime Minister, to go further inside the city of Fallujah, especially after the delivery or the arrival of the volunteer fighters who have volunteered in response to the call of the top religious authority in Iraq, which is the Marja'iyah. The Iraqi army today is well. Yes.
And how reassuring was that defiant speech by Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki earlier?
Yes, the Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki went to Al-Mahmudiyah district, which is used to be controlled by the ISIL members, to one of the recruitment centers, and over there he gave a speech, and in the speech he praised the efforts of the Iraqi army, and he actually showed his appreciation and the bravery, and he was very thankful for the bravery stance which has been taken by the Iraqi volunteers who volunteered to defend their country in response to the top authority, to the top religious authority call in which is Al-Marja'iyah in Al-Najaf Al-Ashraf. In addition to, he promised the Iraqis that there will be no any safe place for the militants and whoever in the government who was backing them up. In addition to, he said that the Iraqi army will march starting from the end of the country in the last point in Basra to the top of the country, to the first point in the up north or Kurdistan. The Iraqi Prime Minister in his speech, he further added that the current situation have showed who is the patriot in the government and who is not, and who is linked to the militants and who is not. Therefore, he promised that he's going to take a proportional response in this regard. Yes.
Wissam, do these armed militants appear to be edging towards Baghdad? And what further security measures is the Iraqi government taking to prevent the extremist groups from infiltrating into the capital?
Yes, in the very beginning, after the fallen of the 3 provinces, Salah ad-Din, Mosul, and Kirkuk, the Iraqi government, represented by the Defense Ministry, have played an important role in regaining the situation in Baghdad and even to prevail the Iraqi the sense of safety among the Iraqis, as they have increased the presence of the Iraqi army and the security personnel across the capital, in and around the capital, and even they have deployed more tanks, machine guns, artilleries, and the Iraqi Air Force was playing a very important role with its 24/7 air patrols over the capital and over the green zone where the Iraqi political process is located. So therefore, after the as I mentioned, the call of Marja'iyah, Baghdad is the safest place, and according to the description of the spokesperson of the Iraqi armed forces, who said that any kind of attempt to enter Baghdad by the militants will be considered as a suicide, and the reaction will be unexpectable. Yes.
Okay, so Wissam, what can you tell us about the sense of unity we're seeing now among the various political factions in the country, and will this be enough to eradicate these extremist militants?
Yes, in fact, the Iraqis today have represented the unity by going to the recruitment centers. In addition to, all of them are asking to be recruited among the Iraqi security forces to defend their country. In addition to, as I mentioned before, according to most of the officials, a portion of the volunteers are from Sunnis, even Turkmen and Azidi's. These people have joined to the Iraqi forces along with their brothers in the Shiite sect across the country to defend their country. In addition to neglect the terrorism in Iraq. So the Iraqis today have agreed on one thing: regardless to the sect, regardless to the nationality, is to defeat the terrorism across the country and to show the world and to send a strong message to the world that despite the political disputes and despite even the sectarian violence across the country, the people are still united and the political process in Iraq will be saved by this unity and the terrorism will be defeated and will be expelled outside the country. Yes.
Now, on the humanitarian side, those Iraqis fleeing the violence, where are they headed? Where are they taking refuge?
To be honest with you, in the very beginning, the three provinces, Mosul, Tikrit, and Kirkuk, most of them have actually headed to the Kurdistan region, but in fact and unfortunately the Kurdish government have refused to allow them to enter the city, so therefore they kept them in the desert between the two provinces. And the problem is the Iraqi government and the current situation inside these three provinces have prevented the government to go there and provide the best services for them. And even the Kurdistan regional government said that it was not well prepared to receive such a high amount of refugees. So therefore these people have been kept in the desert, and they are still suffering from the lack of medical basic services, water, food, and even shelter. Even these people have been deprived even from the tent. And after the liberation of Tikrit, and the fight has still continued in the province of Mosul, the Iraqi government have finally succeeded in sending the Red Cross and the Red Crescent to these refugees and to provide them somehow with something to cope with at least their daily demands, such as tents, water. But the most of the assistance is still underway, and it will be arrived within the next few days, according to the statement of the Red Crescent and the Red Cross in Iraq. Yes. And
what are Iraqis telling you? What do they believe should be done to end this violence and bring an end to these extremist militants?
In the very beginning, and after the reaction of the Iraqi army, the people was afraid, and they said that this thing will take forever. But after the stance that has been taken by the Iraqi people and the support that has been showed by the Iraqi people to their security forces, and this high turnout of the people who have volunteered to defend their country, the Iraqis today are fully assured that the violence in these provinces will not last even for a month, as after this kind of volunteer operation, and these people who have been actually crowded to go and register their names to be to fight alongside with their brothers in the Iraqi armed forces. Defeating the terrorism in Iraq, according to the description of the Iraqi Prime Minister and most of the top security leaders, is only a matter of time. And it's not, as I mentioned, the Iraqi Prime Minister stated that there will be no safe place for any terrorists or even any politician who have actually supported or who was linked to these militants across the country after the military operations and the purification operations which will be done and conducted against the militants across the country. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much for that update there, Wissam Al-Bayati, our correspondent in Iraq. Well, hundreds of followers of the Shiite group Kataib Sayyid al-Shuhada left Iraq's southern city of Basra on Sunday and headed to the capital Baghdad to join the Iraqi army and fight against ISIL militants who have seized a number of Iraqi cities in recent days.
Thousands continue to volunteer throughout Iraq. On Sunday, around 800 followers of the Shia group Kataib Sayyid al-Shuhada departed Iraq's port city of Basra for the country's capital to join the ranks of the Iraqi army and popular defense forces after extremist militants from the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant overran several Iraqi cities earlier in the week. Over the past few days, thousands of Iraqis responded to a call by the country's most influential Muslim Shia cleric, Grand Ayatollah Sayyid Ali al-Sistani, to take up arms and defend the country against insurgency led by the terrorist militant group, the ISIL.
Huge numbers of Iraqi people, represented by members of the Islamic resistance and Kataib Sayyid al-Shuhada, responded to a call by the top cleric in Najaf. The crowd of volunteers in front of you will go for training and then will carry arms to defend the country, sanctities and the people.
Kataib Sayyid al-Shahada had previously sent fighters to the Syrian capital Damascus to defend the sacred Sayyida Zainab shrine, a holy Islamic site in Syria, where fighters there are part of the Syrian-based Liwa Abu Fadl al-Abbas brigades. In a rare intervention during Friday prayers in the Iraqi holy city of Karbala, a message from Grand Ayatollah Ali al-Sistani, who is the highest religious authority for Shias in Iraq, urged all Iraqis to unite in a fight against a dramatic and rapid advance by militants from the radical Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. It didn't take long for Iraqis to heed Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Sistani's calls.
We came today in response to a call by the leading religious authority, who ordered us to go to Samarra and Mosul to liberate them from the atheist members of ISIL, who have no religion. They are neither Sunnis nor Shias.
An offensive by insurgents that threatens to dismember Iraq appears to have slowed down after days of lightning advances. Government forces today regained some territory and counterattacks, easing pressure on the government in Baghdad. As Iraqi officials spoke of wresting back the initiative against the advancing terrorists, neighboring Iran held out the prospect of working with its neighbor to help restore security in the country. So far, an estimated 1.5 million Iraqis have signed up their names with the newly formed Popular Defense Force at various registration stations throughout Iraq, reflecting wide-scale support for the government and the cause of leading religious authorities in the Middle Eastern nation.
More and more displaced Iraqi refugees are fleeing the deadly offensive by ISIL militants and making their way to nearby makeshift camps set up near the Kurdish city of Arbil.
Looking for food, shelter and safety, a quarter of Iraq's second city of Mosul's 2 million wait in the blistering heat, hoping to enter the safety of Arbil camp in the nearby Kurdistan region. And the line keeps growing as the fighting continues between extremist militants from the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant trying to dismember the country and the Iraqi army. Despite lightning advances by the Iraqi government over the armed militants in recent days, officials say the violence is still far from over and many more refugees are expected to arrive.
About 110,000 displaced people and 100 families have arrived in Erbil from Mosul, and the number is set to increase. We have a plan in coordination with UN agencies and NGOs to set up a refugee camp for 3,500 families, because we think that the war in the region won't end soon and the fighting will take a long time, so there will be more refugees.
Many here are terrified of the violence back home, and the lack of supplies figures prominently in their decision to flee. Volunteer groups here provide the displaced families with water and food as Iraqi government forces continue their battle against foreign-backed militants in the north of the country.
The Arab League has expressed its concern regarding the ongoing conflict in Iraq after the country's north was overrun by ISIL militants, fearing that the conflict could expand in the region. The 22-member Arab organization held an emergency meeting in the Egyptian capital, Cairo, where delegates were mulling on ways to support the Iraqi government to battle the extremists.
What is happening in Iraq now is not only a threat to Arab security, but to regional security as a whole. The regional safety is threatened. Our minds are set, but there has to be agreement and careful studying of all aspects of the problem when it comes to standing by Iraq at this current phase.
And former British Prime Minister Tony Blair said on Sunday it was wrong to think that the 2003 Anglo-US invasion of Iraq helped stoke the current crisis and urged the West to take targeted military action there.
So my point is very simple. Even if you left Saddam in place in 2003, then when 2011 happened and you had the Arab revolutions going through Tunisia and Libya and Yemen and Bahrain and Egypt and Syria, you would have still had a major problem in Iraq. We have to look at Syria and Iraq and the region in context. We have to understand what's going on there, and we have to engage. And that doesn't mean, by the way, engagement as in Iraq or Afghanistan and ground troops, but it does mean that we actively try and shape this situation with our allies in the region, and don't believe that if we just wash our hands of it and walk away, then the problems will be solved.
At least 9 people were killed and 23 others wounded in the Iraqi capital Baghdad when a roadside bomb was detonated and was reportedly followed by a suicide blast. Now this as mortar shells struck a recruitment center for civilians volunteering to fight alongside the Iraqi army and their fight against ISIL, killing 6 people in the town of Khalis, north of Diala's provincial capital Bakuba. In other news now, the Syrian town of Kasab, which is located on the border with Turkey, has fallen under government control, following months of fierce clashes between the Syrian army and foreign-backed militants.
Syrian government forces have recaptured the strategic town of Kasab near the only border crossing with Turkey in the northwestern province of Latakia. According to Syrian state TV, units from the Syrian army are re-establishing security in the province after killing a large number of terrorists and destroying their weapons. For more than 2 months, foreign-backed militants have been in control of the Armenian town. However, fierce fighting on Saturday between militants and army troops has pushed some of the fighters, including members of the Al-Qaeda affiliate Al-Nusra Front, out of Kasab. According to the Britain-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, despite the clashes raging on until Sunday, government forces advanced on the village of Nabain near Kasab and eventually entered the town. Kasab is strategically important not only because of its location near the border crossing with Turkey, but it is also vital for militants who use the town as a staging post to transport their wounded beyond the Turkish border. This historic area has been under frequent bombardment by government forces, who have been trying to regain the town ever since it was held by militants on March 21st. The recapturing of the village is another blow to an opposition that has been undermined by recent gains by the Syrian army and ongoing infighting among rival militant groups.
To discuss this further is political analyst Dr. Adwan Rizk. Dr. Rizk, good to have you with us today. So how significant is the Syrian army's retaking of Kasab?
Well, it's very important for the Syrian army because to recapture Kasab, because Kasab has a strategic point and importance not only for the position on the border with Turkey, but also gives a window on or just an exit to the sea, and that they might have needed just to bring more, some armed shipments inside Syria through the sea. So that was important. Second, it's a very strategic, and that gives them a very strong footstep inside the Syrian territories. And then they have used it to launch another attack against Latakia province, and they might have, they were trying, if they were, placed there at peace and with no fighting from the Syrian army, that could have gave them the options to spread around and then launch other attacks against other villages around. and that could just enlarge just the whole situation on the ground, and they might have captured more and more territories. But fortunately, that the Syrian army was aware of this and launched a counter attack against this village or this small city, which has contained the advance of those terrorist groups on the ground and kept them within Kasab. Another point I would like to mention, or just to draw the attention to, is the involvement of the Turkish army. And I believe that the first conclusion of this President Rouhani to Turkey, it seems that led to the recapturing of this town, because we know that the Turkish army was deeply involved in the fighting against the Syrian army, and that even the Turkish army gave all the mortar shelling and coverage to their advance on the ground. So as soon as the Turkish army was just stood silent there and might not have interfered in the fighting, the Syrian army could have captured the city within a couple of days, and this is what happened. So that proves once more that Turkey is deeply involved in the fighting in Syria, and it's leading to prolonging the war, because the Syrian army have all the means and the advance that to cleanse the Syrian territories from this filthy, what they call terrorists or rebels, and they can kick them out of Syria with no time. So the Syrian army now is taking the advantage, recapturing Kasab, and the Turks knows that their dreams of just putting their foot inside Syria has vanished away with the Syrian army recapturing Kasab now.
Okay, so can we expect a response from Ankara to this latest achievement by the Syrian government?
No, I don't think so, because the Turks would probably remain silent in order to responding to the situation or to the conclusion, because I believe that Erdogan is very squeezed in his internal policies, and it seems that he is now very busy reorganizing the situation of Turkey, because Turkey is badly damaged out of the policies that was followed by President Erdogan, and now that they are admitting that they have lost all the what they call so-called Arab Spring, Arab revolutions. We know that was led by the Muslim Brotherhood, which was influenced by the Turks. Now the Muslim Brotherhood almost lost everywhere that they have gained the past 3 years, and now it's the last final battles. So now the Turks only have one choice, is to sit with Iran and try to find some sort of understanding between the Turks and Iran, because for them it's a very important strategic relation with Iran, and their depth into strategically in the region with Iran. So now I believe that they are awake now, and they are not dreaming anymore false dreams like Erdogan and Dawood Oglo, that was the person behind this ideology of spreading around or building the Ottoman Empire. So now Erdogan and Oglo are awake, and they are facing a brutal reality for them. It's that the Turks must bury the dreams of rebuilding what's the so-called Ottoman Empire, leading the Arab Islamic world between the brackets, and they will be again once more the leaders of this Islamic in the name of Islam to lead the Arab world again. So now the Turks are somehow admitting their defeat again in all wars in their plans, so they have no more chance of implementing this plan whatsoever. So now they are, I believe that the serious talks with President Rouhani led to some sort of let's say minimum understanding, at least found a common ground to start a new phase of these issues with Syria.
And those armed militants that retreated from Kasab, I mean, where did they head to? Are there concerns that they will restation elsewhere?
Well, for sure, it's too early to talk about, because we believe that they still have their camps, they still have their bases, they still have their military points inside Turkey. Now it's too early to talk about the future of those terrorists, because it's not yet to talk about finalizing the whole issues in Syria. But now I believe that the whole, the countries, in the Middle East, or let's say in the region, will come to a point where they will sit and discuss the future of those terrorists, and where will they go, what will they do with them, of course, who remains alive, because many of them will be dead by then. So then the remaining of them, of those destroyed gangs, they might return to their country homes, and some of them might face some sentences by the law of their countries, and that could just solve the whole problems. And I think we have a very long war admitting against terrorism, because now what we have seen in Iraq, and it's the same story being repeated in Iraq again, like the one that began in Syria. So war against terrorism, which was backed from the Saudis, financed, trained, backed up, and also very strong supply. They were very strongly supplied by the Israelis. So we have a long war against terrorism, and it's not going to be an easy one, like what we have seen in Iraq lately, and what we have seen in Syria for the past at least 3 years.
Indeed, it won't. Political analyst Dr. Ridwan Rizk, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Do stay with us here on Al-Ittijah World News, still to come. Pakistan fighter jets launch airstrikes on Taliban hideouts, killing dozens of militants. Welcome back. Our top stories are:
تمكنت من قتل العشرات من الإرهابيين في منطقة.
Iraqi security forces kill over 279 terrorists in 24 hours, scoring major advances against Al-Qaeda militants in Mosul. The Syrian army regains full control of the strategic town of Kasab near the Turkish border after months of fierce clashes with foreign-backed militants. And a truce broken as fresh clashes erupt between Yemeni government forces and Houthi rebels close to the capital. Clashes have re-erupted between Shia Houthis and the Yemeni army in the northern province of Amran, ending an 11-day truce which was backed by the United Nations.
Only 11 days after the two sides agreed on a UN-mediated truce, Yemeni Houthi fighters and government forces engaged in fierce fighting, breaking the short-lived treaty. Fresh clashes erupted in the province of Amran, cutting off the main road linking the northern region to the capital Sana'a. The renewed fighting soon spread next door, where troops and Houthi fighters used heavy weapons in the Jarban and Jaiz areas in the Sana'a province. The death toll from the intense confrontations, however, remains unclear. Last week, government officials and representatives of the Houthis, also known as Ansarullah, reached a ceasefire deal to end clashes in Amran province, with the backing of UN envoy to Sana'a Jamal Ben Amor. The conditions of the agreement included the two sides stopping military reinforcements in the area, the deployment of monitors, as well as the reopening of the main road to the capital. Houthis have been fighting the central government for years to demand a halt to marginalization, as they continue to protest against a federalization plan which was reached in February as part of a political transition following the ouster of President Ali Abdullah Saleh.
Staying in Yemen, where at least 8 people have been killed and 12 others injured in a gun attack in the southern city of Aden. The Yemeni army said a suspected Al-Qaeda gunman opened fire on a minibus carrying a number of Aden's military hospital staff. The attack comes amid an all-out offensive by the army against Al-Qaeda strongholds in the southern provinces of Shabwa and Abyan. Well, we have our correspondent in Yemen, Muhammad Al-Attab, with us over the line now for the latest. Muhammad, so this ceasefire has been broken. What can you tell us concerning the reasons behind this?
Regarding the reasons, we can't tell exactly what happened in Amran, because both parties were willing to continue to keep this ceasefire. As the Yemeni president has exerted a lot of efforts along with the UN representative Jamal Ben Omar in order to bring both sides to sign this ceasefire. But they both sides, the Houthis and also the Islamic militants supported by the 310 military brigade, accuse each other of breaking the ceasefire. Today, the clashes which are closer to Sana'a, because they are taking place in Hamdan, which is to the northwest of Sana'a. It's just around 30 kilometers far from the capital. So they are fresh clashes, and the observers are saying that both sides are not willing to stop the ongoing war. The clashes might reach also the capital, as it's witnessing an intense situation between the former president and the current president Abdullah Mansur Hadi, as both persons are having the difficulties to reach an agreement between each other. There are also people who are trying to bring both persons to agree on the continuation of the Gulf blockade initiative, as the former president accuses the current president of breaking this agreement.
Hamad, do you have a death toll for the latest fighting between Houthis and the government forces?
Sorry, I couldn't hear you well.
Do you have a death toll? Do you have the latest number of deaths concerning this fighting between the Houthis and the Yemeni government?
There are no confirmed reports about the casualties from both sides, as the clashes are still continuing till now. Some of the websites that I've looked and also the sources that I've talked to, because they are around 20 people that they have been killed from both sides. But we can't till now confirm the exact number of the casualties.
Okay, and what are Yemenis telling you? How do they believe that this could be resolved, that this violence could be resolved?
Most of the Yemenis are they are in a bad situation. They are having a lot of difficulties regarding the continued blackouts of electricity, the shortage of fuel, and also they are having difficulties of the increase of prices in every product. So they are also having difficulties with the ongoing war in the south with Al-Qaeda, and also the tension between the rivals who are trying to control the unemployment, their groups and loyalists. So the Yemeni people are hoping that this kind of crisis would be resolved with a long-term stability and security, because they are fed up of continued clashes and conflicts and eruption of the fights there, here and there. They would like to have a stable environment where they can build their own nation.
Okay, Mohammed, thank you for that. Mohammed Al-Attab there, our correspondent in Yemen. Now, a day of national mourning has been declared in Kiev after 49 troops were killed in Luhansk. This as the Ukrainian army shelled rebel and public targets in the eastern city of Kramatorsk, killing and wounding over 200 people.
Only hours after Kiev declared Sunday a day of national mourning, after 49 personnel were killed after their plane was downed in the east, its forces did not waste any time pounding rebel and civilian targets in the same region. On Sunday, Ukraine's warplanes moved on to Kramatorsk. There, they launched an intensive crackdown on a number of self-defense checkpoints. Ensuing fighting broke out at the main airfield, leaving up to 50 activists dead, while the number of injured was estimated to be 3 times higher. Artillery attacks were then centered on a nearby hospital. A nurse was killed, while patients had to take shelter underground. Back in Kiev, anti-Russian sentiment seemed to be on the rise. A group of protesters gathered outside the Russian embassy. A riot that began with egg pelting quickly deteriorated into an unprecedented act of vandalism. Windows were smashed and cars overturned. The Russian flag was also destroyed, all under the eyes of security forces guarding the building.
If the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry doesn't want to admit that they are working for the enemy, they have to immediately break off diplomatic relations with Russia and proclaim Putin's regime an aggressor.
The scenes were met with resentment in neighboring Russia. Moscow accused the Ukrainian police of doing nothing to stop whom it described as fascist youths and said that a proposal of condemnation will be submitted to the UN Security Council. The deteriorating situation in the eastern regions, coupled with worsening diplomatic flurry, represents a major blow to any hope of ending a months-long conflict and redirecting Ukrainian-Russian relations on the right path.
A round of EU-brokered talks between Russia and Ukraine over a gas route is due to resume in Kiev later in the day. Last-minute negotiations come ahead of Monday's looming deadline as Moscow has threatened to cut off gas supplies to Kiev if it does not prepay its bills at President Vladimir Putin's final offer of $385 per 1,000 cubic meters. Israeli occupation forces have detained 80 Palestinians in the West Bank city of El Khalil as part of a crackdown following the disappearance of 3 Israeli settlers.
The Israeli entity is clamping down on Palestinians in the West Bank after 3 Israeli settlers disappeared off the map. Israeli occupation forces detained 80 Palestinians in the southern West Bank city of Al Khalil amid an intense crackdown in response to the abduction of 3 of its troops on Thursday. Although there is no sign that the Israeli settlers were kidnapped by Palestinians, the Israeli entity was quick to accuse the Palestinian resistance movement, Hamas, of staging their alleged abduction. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu accused Hamas at Sunday's cabinet meeting, saying that its members had carried out the operation. Netanyahu even went on to hold Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas responsible for the incident on the heels of the formation of a unity government between Hamas in Gaza and Fatah in Ramallah.
Those who carried out the kidnapping of our youngsters are Hamas people, the same Hamas that Abu Mazen formed a unity government with. This will have serious consequences. At the moment, we are focusing all our efforts on bringing the abducted home.
Israeli media circulated information saying that the abductees are members of the Israeli occupation forces. Israeli troops, meanwhile, swarmed the West Bank city of Al-Khalil, heavily armed, as they have been ordered to use all tools at their disposal. Israeli occupation forces imposed a complete lockdown, carried out arrests, and clouded the town in tear gas.
Pakistani fighter jets launched airstrikes early Sunday against Taliban hideouts in the country's troubled northwestern province of Waziristan, killing more than 50 militants.
At least 50 militants have been killed in overnight airstrikes by the Pakistani military in the northwestern tribal region bordering Afghanistan. However, local security officials put the death toll far higher, saying that nearly 150 militants were killed in the airstrikes, which primarily targeted Uzbek fighters in a remote area of the tribal North Waziristan province. Among the dead were insurgents linked to last Monday's all-night siege of Karachi airport that killed 38 people, including 10 attackers, and all but destroyed a tentative peace process between the Pakistani Taliban and the government. The mountainous Dagan area, in which the airstrikes occurred, is a stronghold for Taliban and Al-Qaeda-linked militants on the border with Afghanistan. According to the Pakistani military, there were confirmed reports of the presence of foreign and local militants hiding out in this area who were linked to the planning of the Karachi airport attack. Although a security official said that the number of dead was much higher than 150, Pakistani military sources have not confirmed whether the death toll exceeded the 150 mark. However, the Pakistani military statement said that an ammunition dump had also been destroyed during the strikes and that further details would follow, suggesting the death toll could rise. Pro-Taliban militants have carried out numerous attacks against security forces as well as civilians and managed to spread their influence in various regions of the South Asian country, despite sporadic offensives by the Pakistani army.
A German delegation arrived in the Iranian capital Tehran to hold talks with Iranian officials regarding the Islamic Republic's nuclear energy program. The meeting comes after similar talks Iranian representatives had with their US, French, and Russian counterparts over the past few days. Our correspondent in Tehran, Hussein Dabash, has more in the following report.
Representative at the ongoing talks between Iran and the P5+1 group of countries over Iran's nuclear energy program is in the Iranian capital Tehran. The top German negotiator, Hans-Dieter Lucas, has met with Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif, Iran's top negotiator at the nuclear energy negotiations. Later at a press conference, Zarif highlighted the importance of the meeting.
The talks is part of another meeting that will take place again with German officials in Vienna tomorrow. Such meetings will decide the fate of the ongoing negotiations with member countries. We believe and are also hopeful that all remaining differences with the other side will be gone. I will be attending meetings in Vienna tomorrow.
The visiting German negotiator Hans-Dieter Lucas also had a meeting with his Iranian counterpart Abbas Araghchi, the Islamic Republic's representative at the P5+1 talks. The two held private talks only a day before the official talks between Iran and world powers, which include Germany, are set to kick off on Tuesday in the Austrian capital Vienna. The private talks, according to Iran's foreign ministry, were aimed at bridging the differences that continue to stall the official negotiations. The German negotiator, along with his delegation, also met with Ali Akbar Velayati, the top advisor of the leader of the Islamic Revolution. The meeting between the two top diplomats focused on a range of issues, including bilateral ties between Tehran and Berlin, regional issues such as terrorism in Iraq, and of course the upcoming round of meetings.
We believe that the next round of talks is of high importance for both sides. We spoke about the negotiations between Iran and world powers and the remaining issues that continue to be of complications to a final agreement, but we are confident that if all sides show goodwill, then a final agreement can take place.
The private talks between Iran and Germany come after similar talks representatives from the Islamic Republic had with their American, French, and Russian counterparts in the past several days. Iran has showed interest in such talks, believing that differences over Iran's nuclear energy program can best be settled through having such meetings independently with countries who are concerned about Iran's nuclear energy program. For decades, the other side has accused Iran of building a clandestine nuclear weapons program, an allegation Tehran denies. On November of last year, a historic interim deal was made and implemented in January of this year. The 6-month partial agreement allows some sanctions relief for Iran, and in return, Tehran voluntarily halts some of its nuclear work. Although there are only 5 weeks left before the July 20 deadline of the interim agreement, Tehran seems confident that a final agreement can take place. Iranian President Sheikh Hassan Rouhani has himself said that if a final agreement doesn't take place before the July 20 deadline or even on that date, Tehran has no problem with extending the already in place interim agreement. Reporting for AEE TV, Hussein Dabash, Tehran.
Now a reminder of our top stories. Iraqi security forces kill over 279 terrorists in 24 hours, scoring major advances against Al-Qaeda militants in Mosul. The Syrian army regains full control of the strategic town of Kasab near the Turkish border after months of fierce clashes with foreign-backed militants. And a truce broken as fresh clashes erupt between Yemeni government forces and Houthi rebels close to the capital. That's it for today from all of us here at AEE World News. Have a good night.